Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I think this is a necessary part of the whole process in the innovation cycle, is how to properly capitalize, accelerate, and as they said, the 3Ds. How do we get those all through the system? So with that, let me kind of turn it over to Scott. And Scott, maybe a little bit about your background, and then also a little bit about how you're driving innovation and the process as chairman of the Feinstein.
Thanks, Cliff, and it's great to be here, and it's great to, as I told Kevin Tracy, I didn't realize it was his bar mitzvah, so I didn't bring my card with my check in it, but Kevin, it's in the mail. I've been involved in the Feinstein for about 20 years, and when I first got involved, I thought I was listening to scripts from Star Trek in terms of what the vision was for technology, and then over the last number of years, have seen a lot of these visions become reality. And when you go to the labs and you see our researchers and the innovations that they have, and then the benefit of the Northwell system being able to really have the ties to the clinical trials, and the theme that I'm sure we've heard a lot today, and everyone's heard from Kevin, which is how quickly we can get from bench to bed. How quickly can we take innovation and actually turn it into outcomes that help our patients. And that's been the basic theme of the Feinstein. I think we're now at a really important crossroads where the concept is how do we take the research that's more academic in nature and now turn it into something that we can commercialize as quickly as possible. And how do we streamline that process? And I think this next evolution of the Feinstein is to create this ecosystem of public-private partnerships that create collaboration amongst all those different stakeholders to be able to quickly take these innovations, commercialize them, expand them, adopt them, and make them something that are easily brought through the healthcare systems as a norm and profile. And I think one of the things that's really important today, and on a macro basis, is we're not alone, right? The world has changed in the last year, that every industry, every segment of the economy is going through a period of total change of how they do things. There's not one organization, whether it's in businesses, manufacturing, retail, that isn't thinking about how am I using large language models, robotics, whatever that technology is, to reimagine how we do things. And then that's also going to the end user. And so the expectation now of your end user, your customer, your patient, is also seeking to have that different experience. So it's almost, from our standpoint, it's the perfect time for us to take this next leap for the Feinstein of really accelerating that commercialization, breaking the models of the past, and trying to focus on the models of the future. And just because someone did something a certain way and this was a bureaucracy you had to work your way through, challenge it. And the good news is, beyond that, we have an administration that wants to break the norms of the past. And so instead of fighting that, lean into that opportunity to be able to say, it was done this way, but does that make sense today? And are we getting the best outcome? And I bet you, in doing that, we're going to have their support.
Thanks. Juan Paulo, maybe you could talk a little bit, introduce yourself and your journey as it relates from pharma to VC and who your partners are.
Yeah, thank you. Tremendous to be a part of this celebration around bioelectronic medicines. I'm a partner at Action Potential Venture Capital, a subsidiary of GlaxoSmithKline, investing a fund that's focused on bioelectronic medicines and has been for the past 11, 12 years, which is how long I've been there. The impetus for that was to disrupt the pharmaceutical industry from within. That was a GSK initiative, and a think tank was created internationally around what could disrupt the pharmaceutical industry, and the neural systems of the body. The nervous system as a therapeutic axis was identified as an area that had that capability, as was discussed earlier today. My background is actually an engineer, so I'm an electrical engineer by training. eventually was introduced to medical devices through the biodesign program at Stanford, worked in industry as an R&D engineer at Medtronic, later in commercial efforts at Eli Lilly, and started to sort of move into the pharma field from the technical perspective, and this belief that the brain and the nervous system was going to be a lifelong journey for me in an area that I was personally willing to focus on because the opportunities were so vast, and data points that we were seeing when eventually having gone back to business school and getting into venture capital with some of the leading venture firms in medical device early innovation, seeing the therapeutic access of the nervous system, treating so many diseases that were otherwise, previously billion-dollar drug markets with deficiencies, with many of the challenges that physicians and patients struggle with today still. But we have investments today in areas or have touched companies that treat heart failure. We're an investor in SetPoint and on the board of SetPoint. We have novel, non-invasive technology for movement disorders, Parkinson's, essential tremor, urinary incontinence that was mentioned, pulmonary hypertension. There have been ophthalmic advances using the nervous system. The list is incredibly vast, naturally, given the neural circuitry and the wiring of the body. And pharma, I think, recognizes that. I think there's healthy pockets of skepticism in pharma, and when I say healthy, I don't know that it's a positive. It's more that there are significant skepticism within pharma inside of these organizations, but the leadership that it takes to drive change that's being demonstrated, I believe, here at Northwell and other institutions that are willing to bring in interdisciplinary approaches to adopting not just discovery development, but again adoption and deployment, as mentioned by Kevin, I think have historically been what's driven change in healthcare, and I think it is absolutely what will be the success here as well with bioelectronic medicine. So, happy to talk more about it as we get into it.
Thanks, Juan Paulo. And Jeff, you almost need no introduction, but as it relates to financing, I mean, you wrote an article in the Federation of American Scientists about creating a U.S. innovation accelerator model looking like the old InQtel back in the day. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what Cliff is referring to is that I'm a firm believer that early stages in any type of technology development or therapeutic development, whatever, is very high risk. And this is where the government can actually be very helpful. The government can provide non-dilutive capital, basically, and that's a good thing for anything. So DARPA does that. I helped start another agency called ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Project Agency for Health. I testified before Congress about that model, and that model was actually to do the transition from NIH into to advanced development, be that early clinical trials, building out advanced prototypes, that sort of thing. Because NIH wasn't set up to do that. NIH is set up to do the foundational research, which is totally, totally important. If we didn't have NIH, we would be nowhere. So NIH switched to ARPA-H, and then after that, I found that there was still a gap. You still got to get across the so-called valley of death. At what point have you reduced risk enough that private capital can then start to come in? Because the assumption of risk for folks like Scott and folks like Juan Pablo is that they have to show a return on investment at some point, whereas the government said you don't, really, because where does the government get its ROI? The government gets its ROI from taxation. I mean, fundamentally, that's it. I mean, that was the original model, always, always, always. That's why the U.S. government doesn't own factories. The U.S. government doesn't own, equity in companies. They just don't. The Bayh-Dole Act makes it very clear. That may change, I don't know, but the Bayh-Dole Act made it very clear that the universities, the entrepreneurs, they keep their IP. The government's only thing is to provide non-dilutive capital with no strings attached. The thing about that is that it's actually a great model because they want the companies that are invested in to succeed. Why? Because they'll employ Americans. That's a good thing. The second thing is the government will then tax them on income tax. That's a good thing too. You're going to sell whatever it is you're going to sell. The government will tax that. The tax man always gets what he wants, right? And the thing about the tax man is that ROI has been calculated. The ROI from some of the DARPA investments has been calculated out to be, well over a 10 to 15-fold investment, return on investment, which is fantastic for use of early capital and is super important for early stage companies. So what we're talking about is how, in fact, now do we have that next step? So DARPA is through Department of Defense. ARPA H is through the Health and Human Services. What we're really talking about is now building out the companies, right? And that's what this Innovator Fund is being proposed. And we are in discussions with Commerce, because I believe it should sit in Commerce. So what we did for ARPA H when we got it started, my friends and I, we're now pivoting and trying to get it going through Commerce. And the point there is, how do you develop the business part, right? So Congress, when it gives money to these federal agencies to spend on research, for example, they actually, we call it the color of money. They actually grade it, 6.1 to 6.6. 6.1 and 6.2 dollars are used for basic science. That's what NIH spends its money on, 6.1 and 6.2, very early stage. They are not by law, allowed to spend it for 6.4, 6.5. In other words, advanced development. They cannot use their money to do that. So when they say, oh, NIH, you're not doing that, it's because there's a federal law. And at the end of the day, most of us still have to, obey federal law, right? So, and ARPA H was getting $6.3, $6.4, which allowed them to do some advanced development. But none of those dollars are allowed to be used for business development. They cannot be used for patent prosecution. They can't be used for marketing. They can't be used for, hiring anybody that would essentially do business development, because those are research dollars. Again, it's against the law, all right? So, and the idea was, can we set up another fund, another bucket of money? And I would propose $5 billion. It's published. I put it out there, just like I did for ARPA H. I put it out there for everyone to throw rocks at. And so this one is published, and what we were proposing is a $5 billion. It would be a shared risk model. And what that means is you've gotten your NIH money, you got your ARPA H money, now you're actually able to step out. You're able to build out a company. Mertha could come, this would go to this for this. And what it is that initially you say you're still early stage, you need, we'll make the numbers easy, you need $10. $8, 80% will be supplied by the government as non-dilutive capital if you can raise $2. Now, you should be able to go to Juan Paul and Scott and go, look, I got $8 of U.S. government money. Can you give me $2? And we're hoping that they say, yes, that would be great. And that'd be money for 2 years. And then it switches. If you can get another little tranche of government money, but now the private side would assume higher risk to it. But by that time, you've moved further down the path. And I believe by doing that, we'd be very successful. This fund was only set for biotechnology, such as the things that Kevin is a pioneer in, and it's because the U.S. still dominates. The U.S. unquestionably dominates in the biotech space, but that's not going to last forever, right? It's just not. And so what the U.S. is great at is innovating because of the way our structure of our government and our philosophy is. Young people are taught to challenge conventional wisdom. This is a good thing. That's how come we innovate so well. But then we also have a robust business industry that can grab this and pull this, but we do have to recognize there is a risk to it. And the good thing about being on the government side is it's non-dilutive capital, that's number one, and the program managers are not held to the same criteria that these guys are held to. If the company fizzes out, bad luck, we tried, we move on to the next thing. If bad luck fizzes out for Juan Pablo, he's looking for a job. So we don't have those same pressures on the government side. And that's why I think this public-private partnership that Scott talked about is so critically important. And that's why I think this new InQtel-based fund would be a really solid idea. I actually think of it as a form of a sovereign fund, really. And the idea is that any money that's gathered would roll back into the sovereign fund because it's still a government thing, and they can fund more things. It's a good thing.
And if I could just add one thing to this, because I think it gets to the private-public partnership, the time element that venture capital funds are constrained by, typically 10-year life cycles to a fund, is a major challenge to any innovation that takes longer. So, and typically, 10 years is even too long unless you invest on day one of raising the fund before the fund typically sunsets. And so that inherently is the challenge with innovation like bioelectronic medicines, 10 years plus easily for many of these breakthrough categories, which, by the way, only exit typically once they're generating revenue, for investors. It's not like biotech where historically you can either get public or be acquired by a large pharma organization that'll finish the registrational studies and commercialize on your behalf with their existing sales force. So these time crunches for medical device companies inherently require these partnerships with whether it's government agencies and non-dilutive grants, but also family offices, foundations, evergreen funds that are less strict about the time to return on their investment.
Great. I'd like to also point out, the word bioelectronic medicine Yet, by the way, I think this is the only panel where we have 2 electrical engineers versus neurologists, rheumatologists, doctors, PhDs. And I do believe that at some point in time, we're going to have to bring other skill sets to really kind of foster this and move this forward. And I'm an electrical engineer and physicist by training, and having electrical engineers and physicists involved with PhD, MD in bioelectronic medicine is going to have to be necessary. And one of the things I was talking to Dr. Battinelli about and others is how do we take the medical school and start bringing in or recruiting electrical engineers, where we have a wonderful pool of talent here in the Northeast, to really start to push that innovation. I just wanted to make sure I can at least put the stamp on for us, Paul. The other thing I would say is, let's talk about de-risking. How do we de-risk? Jeff, you talked a little bit about it with the stages of capital for the government. And I think, Juan Paulo, I think, for us, Northwell is launching something called Northwell Health Equity Partners, which is a vehicle by which to invest in this. And it has Northwell as a partner, right? And we'll talk a little bit about, to a certain extent, it's almost like to get FDA approval, it's table stakes. There is nothing to talk about if we don't get through that. But it's the journey and the arduous task. Once you get that FDA approval, what do you have to do to actually deploy? And if you don't have that, as they talked about, you don't have that third D of those 3 Ds, your investment's going to go down the tubes. So you have GSK and yourself. Talk a little bit about how that helps you analyze, diligence, and figure out your investment strategy.
Yeah, so it's couldn't be sort of emphasized enough how important partnerships. It's almost like today that theme is resounding, and it's key to both the development process. I mean, if you think about what bioelectronic medicines are, they're devices with chips that are connected to cloud, allow for computation both on device, in the cloud, have software that can drive an adaptation and personalization, have sensors that are collecting biomarkers, and the potential for intelligent medicines, the future of medicines, is really what is created by them, but requires an intersection of disciplines and partnerships in that discovery and development phase. Increasingly important, especially for companies post-FDA, is this partnership with folks in the room across payer, provider, systems that are forward-looking and are creating brick-and-mortar institutions like the Bioelectronic Institute at Northwell. That leadership will require sort of persistence and commitment and conviction and flexibility across indications. A lot of today's conversations around inflammation and rheumatoid arthritis, clearly one of the leading, most impactful potential areas of bioelectronic medicine. But there are going to be many more after that, and there will be different call points, different challenges for each one. And so those doors have to remain open, and it has to start as with sort of the end in mind. I think payment, as has been talked about before, unlocks so much, because if there is payment, and if legislation allows for earlier payment, in particular in breakthrough opportunities that have long development cycles and require long clinical trials, you can start having conversations that don't feel like, well, we'll just wait till all that is sorted. Frankly, the people in this room, I'm learning more about the scale, the referral patterns required, understanding existing, bias by clinicians that are actually, coming from a good place with the right intentions, but they need to, I think, keep that open mind, look at the data. It's on us to generate that rigorous data and answer the health economic questions that are fundamental to every single new innovation in the space.
And Scott, talk a little bit about, Northwell is the parent of Feinstein, in essence. And so talk a little bit about how has the Northwell relationship helped the Feinstein accomplish its goals, because there is controversy around, is the academic model of the past going to continue, or is integrated health systems with research and integration of clinical and research going to take a much more important role in innovation and driving that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it ties to a lot of this because it is fundamentally almost a public-private partnership, right?
Right.
In the sense that Northwell is this enormous health system that's financially sound, has a big catchment basins of diverse patients that they can tap, and so it gives the Feinstein, from a research standpoint, a foundation to take more risk than you might otherwise take if you didn't have that as you went through it. It's also, I would say, critically important to think about. We look at what we do in Northwell always from the very beginning, and Feinstein, as not having silos. We were not meant to be a research organization that's being judged on how many papers we write, but how many products and solutions we're able to put forward for patients, right? And so people that come to the Feinstein, they come with an attitude of, I want to collaborate, I want to make a difference, I want to impact patients' health outcomes. And so that is, I think, a critical piece. And I think the last piece is, as we're rolling out this process here now with the latest FDA approval and having the Bioelectronic Center of Medicine, we're building our own, what I'll call IP, about how do you actually do this? How do you actually think through the payer part? How do you negotiate with the insurance companies? What's that interaction with the patient and that customer service, so to speak, with that patient to make sure their journey is a good journey? How do you talk to the physicians and figure out who are the power users that are going to want to embrace this and be the cheerleaders for the future? And so this is a critical stage that if we do this right, we're going to be able to replicate this over and over again. And then, with that, it becomes the opportunity to really amplify the successes, which, the more that you can do that and get to social media, the patients that have these diseases and challenges that farmers aren't able to cure are reaching out already to the Feinstein and say, we want to participate, right? We want to get to do this. And so you can create much more quickly now knowledge about, different alternative ways to address some of these challenges than in the past. And I think the last piece with that is, and it ties to what Jeff said, the other part of public-private partnerships is, I think you can use philanthropy in the early stages, particularly targeted philanthropy with people who have specific passions about a disease because of a family member having an issue, and really on those early stages fill the void for where you may not have private sector capital or payers that come in, where we can actually start clinical trials to try to accelerate the advancement of using bioelectronic medicine to cure other diseases.
And it's very important to understand, Northwell is a nonprofit.
Correct.
Right. We're not some big behemoth, even though
Right.
we are, but our margins are all about bringing that capital and accomplishing the mission that John D'Angelo laid out, and how do we further propagate that on an accelerated time frame versus just relying on philanthropy. And that's why Northwell, as I had said last night, is really being very, very innovative about its private-public partnership and this new entity, which is taking actually outside capital to be more aggressive in terms of investing in growth investments, that allows us to then return that capital to a certain amount back to the system so that they have incremental capital to support the Feinstein even greater and those things. Just to give you an idea, as both all the three panelists have said, to get SetPoint, because SetPoint was also an investment on the part of Northwell. We just came in this last round. I almost feel like Northwell's created this operating system that you take an integrated clinical environment with that research, bring that together, go into an integrated ops group, and then literally have no less than 12 to 13 different departments, from IT, cybersecurity, procurement, clinical protocols, business development, strategic development, payer, managed care, insurance. All of that went into that decision-making process, goes up into this 28 hospital system, and then has, frankly, can go and mine and get that, 16 million patient encounters we have, 5 million patients treated annually, one of the largest RA centers here in New York. That's what de-risks this stuff, okay? It's not, there's a lot of smart folks with a lot of great track records, but to have what One Palo has or what Northwell can leverage and the Feinstein is unique, and it's really important for people to understand that uniqueness. Oh, great, we have 17 seconds left. So, guys, any last minute comments? Sorry, it's a throwaway. Jeff, you're good?
Good.
Juan?
No, thank you again for having this. I mean, to your last point, SetPoint certainly had options in terms of where the company went first with its first commercial implants, and the leadership here and the community here was critical in the decision to come to Northwell with those first patients. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and I'll just say that my prediction is we're going to be sitting here a year from now, and everyone's going to be amazed at how much more advanced we've taken this, because things are moving much faster than any decades before. So I look forward to next year.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.